when we talked about doing something here in Paris, since I sort of thought it's going to be mixed, a lot of seasoned students, practitioners, and probably few new ones, I thought it would be difficult for me to say anything that is cohesive to and pragmatic to that will benefit everyone. So then I asked if maybe organizers can arrange some questions, then I could maybe, based on these questions, we can have conversations. So that's what's going to happen today. Hopefully this will at least create some curiosity. There were quite a lot of questions, so I personally chose only maybe half, because probably we will not be able to finish all. Also, a lot of the questions seems to overlap, so I thought maybe it's okay. So should we begin with the questions? Is somebody going to read the questions? You are going to read it, or someone?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, you can read. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you read in English and French. Okay.
Let's do this. So first question. You said that Vajrayana was tailor-made for modern people, but it requires a lot of time or formal practice. So why not giving more openly Mahasandhi or Dzogchen teachings?
Okay. Well, Vajrayana being tailored-made for the modern people actually was said by the Buddha himself, not me.
Donc, la première phase, là.
Before we talk about modern people, I'm going to talk about another analogy. It looks, since we are in France, we can talk about sex. If there are any, Californians, who cares? It looks like there are, according to Tantra, there seems to be 4 different ways of having sex. Some people get satisfied just looking at each other. Others, who are slightly more I guess thick-skinned, they need to at least smile at each other. Aren't you French? You should be very good at this. Then others need to caress. Then really, people who really are, like jaded, they need cheese grater.
Et ceux qui sont vraiment...
This is exactly from the tantric text, not the cheese grater bit.
Et ça vient, c'est exactement, là je cite les...
For those who can just look at each other and get satisfied, for them, Kriya Tantra is taught. Those who really requires whips and chains and cheese graters, for them, Anuyoga Tantra is taught. Now that's my analogy. Now, it is said that in the past, like in the ancient time, when people were by instinct, by nature, they are more, moral, so-called moral. So for them, Kriya Tantra is taught. In fact, actually, for them, maybe Sharvakayana, Mahayana, sutras. So now, during this time, the time of very, strong, it's a very volatile time, then it is said in the in the Tantra that Anuyoga Tantra is even more potent. Now, teaching Mahasandhi or Mahamudra openly is already happening. There's few YouTube links. If you want, I can send it to you. There are the Tibetan ones, and there are non-Tibetan ones. Non-Tibetan ones are actually quite good. But the thing is, whether it will click with the people or not, that's an entirely different matter. So this is the magic or the mystery or the beauty of the Vajrayana. This was clearly demonstrated in the Milarepa's biography. Remember, he first went to a Dzogchen master who said, oh, well, my teaching, if you are good at it, overnight you will be enlightened. But nothing really happened. Even though that master, Lamang Okpa, I think, he taught very well. But when Milarepa went in search for Marpa Lotsawa, and when he first saw Marpa Lotsawa was plowing field, moment he saw Marpa Lotsawa, whole his body had a goosebump. So this level is another entirely different matter. Now there is an interesting question here. It requires a lot of time of a formal practice. This is something that I wanted to actually discuss. I believe that you are talking about something like a ngondo, prerequisite. Before the Dzogchen teaching, you should do this, like some sort of a formal practice. Now this is a valid question, but this is again, for me, it's kind of difficult to answer, black and white. It really depends so much between the teacher and the student. If a teacher is like a Buddha and the disciple is like a Kashyapa, just Shakyamuni Buddha holding a flower, that did it. Naropa serving Telopa 12 years, a lot of hardship, begging for a teaching. Telopa never taught. After 12 years, one day as they walk by the bank of Ganges, or some water, Telopa grabbed Naropa and said, I have nothing to teach you. That's what he said. And Naropa got it. There's actually a Mahamudra text called Chajachimbo Gangama, the Mahamudra of Ganges. For people like myself, who is already so much brainwashed, even when I read the text, there are some goosebumps sometimes. Now, teacher like myself, and student like you, who doesn't have the capacity, we have to rely on a certain formula. So, if you want to introduce somebody a really good cup of coffee, and if the person is already quite good with a coffee, then you can bring it to some really boutique coffee shop who might serve coffee with egg yolk, like in Vietnam, right? Rest of us is better to introduce to Starbucks. Safe. You know what you are getting. Franchised. So there are a lot of franchised practice called things like Ngondo. They are franchised practice. But you can't just outright, sort of dismiss them, because they are very, very carefully designed. Refuge, bodhicitta, all of them, one after another, they're kind of important. But I think what, us who are really trying to practice the Dharma, what we need is we need to define what is practice and what we mean by good practice. So, like, if you, after taking, let's say, after joining this path, if you are somebody who are beginning to think life is uncertain, or that worldly things really does not give us 100% satisfaction, then you should define this as, okay, I'm practicing refuge well. Because refuge means surrender, right? So you are surrendering to the truth. But it's easier. Have you finished your refuge? It's easier, for the teacher to ask, did you finish your refuge? And are you now on bodhicitta? Your teacher never asks you, oh, okay, so last night when you say good night to your partner, you actually thought that this may be the last one? If you thought about that, then you are becoming a practitioner. We don't really say this. Okay, so that's my very long-winded, but I don't know whether I have answered the question, but that's the answer. Okay, the second one.
Second questions. There's plenty of scope for us to go astray on the path, especially when it comes to Vajrayana. How to avoid confusing the means with the goal?
Okay, this is a big generalization. I mean, my answer will be generalization. Who knows? Maybe you are this path dweller that has a connection to this, path, tantra. I think the classic advice by our masters still applies. Hearing and contemplation, especially hearing and contemplating on view. Generally, the view of all the Buddha's teachings, but especially if you want to climb the Vajrayana mountain, definitely invest some time on studying the view or aspiration for the view. If you really appreciate the Vajrayana view, even, partially, I think you will become very brave. You become brave, daring, and no qualms, no fear of going out of the box. Until then, we love our safety. And now, more than ever, people are so crazy about the safety. So if you need to wear helmet, padding and insurance company here and a lawyer next to you, and then it's not an adventure anymore. Might as well just stay in the bed. Okay. What's the next one?
Next questions. What are the difference between Samaya and practice commitment in Vajrayana? Non-Vajrayana.
That's an important question. Actually, there isn't any difference. But I want to talk about Samaya a little bit. If you are a beginner Vajrayana practitioner, you have to accept you will break Samayas. If you are not going to break samayas, no need the teaching. Trying to keep the samaya as intact as possible is our training. And strictly from the tantric point of view, very easy to break samayas. If you make a distinction between orangeness of the Manjushri and the orangeness of Donald Trump, you have broken the samaya.
Vous avez cassé les samayas.
That's how it is easy to break. But that is your challenge. And because we know that, Vajrayana also makes sort of Gorim, sort of hierarchy or sort of Gorim of different samayas. Like if you harm other beings, you are breaking Vajrayana vow. If you disobey Shakya Muni Buddha, not Vajrayana, Vajradhara, Shakya Muni Buddha, you also break the Vajrayana vow.
Et pas, je dis pas Vajradhara ou le Bouddha Shakyamuni, vous cassez les samayas.
Yes. Yes, this is a good question. Keeping the samaya and practicing are synonymous in many ways. Okay, what's the next one?
Next questions. How do you make sure samaya between you and your students remain as pure as possible, as you have so many followers? How do you deal with such a huge number of followers' expectations and their urge to be physically close to you?
Not at all good. And this is what do you call it? I will tell you the reason.
Je vais vous donner la raison.
I have the fortune to meet many of these people in front of me. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche, Dzogsar Rinpoche. Like, especially Dzogsar Rinpoche and Khyentse Rinpoche, there's something about them. Everybody thinks that they are the most special for them. I don't know, from the king to the most, like out there in the, like corner of the monastery, whoever, doesn't matter. They all think that they have the total attention from them. I have met them. For me, it's the opposite. Most of the people think that I ignore them, which I. And I also put a lot of effort in ignoring them.
D'accord.
These two, they don't do anything extra. They're just there all the time. If you read the qualities of the Buddha, forget the Buddha, even the first Bhumi, the second Bhumi, the third Bhumi bodhisattvas, higher bodhisattvas, they talk about the quality of this, higher bodhisattvas, that they can connect with hundreds and thousands and 100,000 and 100 million. By meeting these two people, I can see, oh yeah, must be working like that. But there's one element, the question, how do I keep the samayas between me and my students? Well, I don't know whether I'm doing a good job or not, but I have sort of again, thanks to all these great masters, I have learned few lessons. I open my closets and show them some skeletons. Not all. I have no guts. You know, I'm still an ordinary being, so I will not show you completely. And I think probably this may be helping me to, make sure that expectations are under, sort of monitored, so to speak. But I have to say, some of the pure perception, even towards me, and sorry to use this word even from Western students, has been quite really surprising. Of course, from the Tibetans, there's a culture, there's that, whole history. So once when I went to Tibet, so many days I was on the riding horse, and I'm a really bad. I don't like riding horse, but there's no choice. But this guy, the one who actually leads the horse, and horse actually walks quite fast, and he's actually basically like half running all the time, trying to make sure I don't fall. When my trip is finished, I gave him my watch. It was a good watch, I think. Omega, right? Omega, right. I said, okay, you should wear this. Then, few days in the car, still trying to reach China. I didn't see him wearing my watch. I said, where's my watch? Oh, he said, oh yeah, it's here. And he opened this small casket, locket. And then there, he actually crushed the watch and kept one I guess one of the main engine inside. And then the rest, he gave it to his family. And he was even a little bit shy. He said, I kept the best part for myself. But I also have a student, American student, and he was always bugging me what he should practice. I was about to fly, and I was going inside boarding, like boarding a plane. I was sort of irritated. He again asked, what should he practice? I actually didn't hear what he was saying, so I said, what is it? Uh-huh. So he asked me, you mean chant, what is it? Then I said, yes. Et je dis, oui, c'est ça. Then he said, how many times? I was joking, a million times, why not? And he did chant 1 million times. And I think he got into trouble when sometimes he asked, he chanted this in front of other people, like, what is it, what is it? And then other people asked, what is it that you asked? And then he said, what is it? Okay, what's the next one?
Next question. How to understand the apparent contradiction? A yogin should not associate with a Samaya corrupter, even for an instant. And the other statement, joyful in all action, the Dzogchen yogi, happy in any company.
I chose this, I wanted to answer this, even though it's a little technical. But this technical challenge exists with a lot of Buddhist practitioners and students. Many times the teachings comes more from the view's point of view. And then other teachings comes more from the practice's point of view. And also, similarly, some teachings more from the ultimate view, some from the relative view. This is a big challenge, in so much a challenge that, in fact, Guru Rinpoche made a point of saying, like one should not, one's view should be as, spacious as the sky, one's action should be as subtle as a flower, so on and so forth. It exists in many, many ways. For instance, like when you are practicing, how much should you be confident? How much should you be humble? Both you need. Okay. Let's go to the next one.
Donc, question suivante. Next questions. What are, for you, the main differences between giving teachings and empowerments in the West and in Asia, and between lay people and monastics? Quelle est la différence? Quelles sont les principales différences ou à des monastiques?
This is a very big question. Cannot be answered easily. But I wanted to say something about this because non-Asians, let's call it, non-Asians can really uphold the Buddha Dharma. Non-Asians can't uphold Tibetan Buddhism, you understand, or Asian Buddhism, which you don't also need anyway. Croatians, French, English, you can really preserve and protect anicca, dukkha, anatta. And that's what you should. You don't have to uphold how the Thai tradition do the prostrations and how they build their temples. You don't have to. Now, this is what I want to share. Beyond that, as I said, this is a very big question. Cannot really answer it easily. Because there's a big difference between culture also. Language, for instance, just the language itself will make a big difference. What is good in English and bon in French must have some difference. But you French people are losing it. You guys are watching too much Netflix. I'm sure your bon is very much dictated by Netflix. Not only you are losing it, I think it's almost irreversible. I used to teach in France quite a lot. Actually, my teaching sort of to the Western Sangha, the biggest started from France. Yeah, so language. So then language, what is good in Tibetan, in English, in Sanskrit, are really big difference. So if we want to go through that, it's a really big subject. I think we can skip this one. Okay, what's the next one?
Next question. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and many masters have said that Westerners lack a healthy sense of self. The lack of fundamental self-confidence is a glaring example of this, which follows us all the way. How can we overcome this?
This is actually exactly very connected to the earlier question, the cultural. I don't know what the Lamas, masters who said Westerners lack a healthy sense of self. Actually, I don't know what they mean. If you ask the Californian libertarian, what? Libertarian, right? What? Libertarian.
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 Okay.
Californian. Yeah. If you ask a Californian libertarian, they will disagree. In fact, the West really put so much emphasis on self, especially the modern West. Individualism, freedom of this, freedom of that. You know, like the West really, put emphasis on self, individual self. It's very important. So I don't know. Is that unhealthy? Probably. I was reading, Chinese Confucius master, what's it, Khuangzi? And there's a lot of analect. He has a lot of these sort of short,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, I don't know, stories, but it has some teachings in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there was a time he was talking about what is good, good lady, good gentleman. I guess he was talking about that. Like how the men should be honest, all of that. And then one day one of his disciples came rushing and said, "Oh, I did something good. So I must be a good gentleman," basically. Master asked him, "What did you do?" The student said, student's father, he did something wrong, and he reported to the officials. The master said, "That's not good. Son should cover the father should cover, son." So Asian societies like Chinese, they value family more, or the collective more than individual. I'm not saying that's better or worse. It's just different approach. And these things matters because then, even in quite open society like Japan, they may control usage of stuff like TikTok because for the collective, good. So, healthy sense of self. I don't know what the lamas are talking about. I don't know, it's not related, but it's in my head, and I think I should just say it. I heard that the artificial intelligence is going to really, really test our self and identity. And I'm kind of happy about it. Because finally people will read Heart Sutra. Shakyamuni Buddha have dealt with this issue long time ago. Anyway, let's see. Okay, shall we take a break?
On peut faire une pause, non? Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Shall we take a break? Yeah.